Imagine for a second, right, that you are sitting in this highly tense multi-million-dollar corporate negotiation.
Oh, wow. Sounds stressful already.
Yeah, exactly. The room is dead silent. Everyone is wearing a sharply tailored suit. And suddenly, the CEO of the opposing company leans forward, looks you dead in the eye, and essentially says, all right, I'm going to drop a giant pot of cooked pinto beans all over the floor.
I mean, if you are actively translating English in your head, word for word, that is exactly the bizarre, surreal threat that you just heard.
Right. But nobody in the room panics. Nobody, calls the janitor. Instead, everyone leans in closer.
Because they know the CEO is about to reveal a deeply held corporate secret.
Exactly. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are cracking the secret code of natural language, and we are doing it by exploring phrases that, if we're being completely honest, sound like absolute nonsense when you first hear them.
It's a phenomenal scenario to picture, honestly, because it perfectly captures the shock to the system that language learners experience every single day. Like, we spend years learning language as if it were an exact science, like a mathematical equation. But then we encounter these phrases where the equation completely breaks down.
Right. Usually we just assume that noun plus verb equals a very specific meaning. You learn a vocabulary word, you memorize the grammar rule, you plug the word into the sentence, and theoretically perfect communication happens.
Theoretically being the operative word there.
Yeah. But today we are stepping out of that sterile laboratory and into the messy, vibrant, and completely illogical street-level reality of how humans actually speak.
And we have some great source material for this.
We do. We are basing our entire deep dive today on a fascinating conversational guide called Mastering Conversational Idioms for Natural English Expression.
Right.
It features two speakers, Aman and Ria, who are going to act as our guides through this incredibly murky linguistic terrain.
What I find so compelling about Aman and Ria's guide isn't just that they, provide a list of vocabulary. It's that they frame idioms as a fundamental key to natural expression.
Yeah, it's not just a textbook glossary.
Exactly. Their core premise is really an exploration of the massive gap between the literal definitions of words and the emotional weight of what we are actually trying to say to one another.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're listening to this, you already know what a lot of these phrases mean. You don't need us to sit here and define piece of cake for you.
No, definitely not.
Instead, we want to dissect the psychology behind these phrases. Why do human beings consistently choose to abandon perfectly good, logical words in favor of strange, non-literal imagery?
It's a great question. Why complicate things?
Right. And why do these quirky phrases add so much personality to our speech? And most importantly, we want to unpack the sheer psychological terror of trying to weave these into your own conversations without sounding like a glitching robot.
I think the word terror is actually incredibly accurate there. It requires a tremendous leap of faith to use an idiom in real time.
Because it's so high stakes.
It really is. You are transitioning from simply transmitting raw data to actively trying to participate in a shared cultural shorthand.
Well, let's start right there with the anatomy of that shorthand. Because Section 1 of Aman and Ria's guide hits this immediately.
Yeah, they don't waste any time.
They define an idiom quite clearly as a phrase whose meaning is entirely different from the literal meaning of the individual words. And they state that the primary function of an idiom is to, and I quote, add color and personality to language.
Which is very true.
But I want to push on that a little bit. Why do we need to add color? I mean, if I just communicate literally, isn't that more efficient?
Well, it might be more efficient for a machine, sure, but human communication isn't just about efficiency, it's about resonance.
Resonance. I like that.
Yeah, if we look at the foundational difference between literal and figurative meaning, we really have to consider what purely literal communication actually sounds like in practice.
Okay, give me an example.
So if I only ever conveyed the exact, undeniable facts of my internal state, I would sound entirely robotic. Like, imagine if a friend asked how my new job was going, and I replied, I am currently experiencing a high level of stress due to a large volume of complex tasks that exceed my current processing capacity.
Wow. You sound exactly like an artificial intelligence reporting a system error. Like, battery low, processing load high, require maintenance.
Precisely. It conveys the facts with absolute perfect accuracy, but it is completely stripped of its soul.
It's missing the human element.
Right. It lacks the shared human experience of being overwhelmed. Idioms exist to bridge that terrifying gap between cold, clinical facts, and messy human emotion.
So they're almost like emotional shortcuts.
Exactly. They are these incredibly dense, highly efficient emotional vehicles that allow us to express complex feelings and subtle social nuances in just a few syllables.
I have a theory about this that I want to run by you.
All right, let's hear it.
I've always viewed idioms as a language's macro inside jokes. Think about how an inside joke works in a small friend group.
Oh, yeah. Like when one person says a single word and everyone loses it.
Exactly. Someone says a seemingly random word, maybe it's a reference to a disastrous camping trip from 5 years ago, and the whole group bursts into laughter. If an outsider's standing there, they hear the word, they know the dictionary definition of the word, but they are completely locked out of the punchline.
Because they don't have the context.
Right. They're staring at you, wondering why you're laughing about a broken tent pole when you're just talking about a business meeting.
You know, I wouldn't even call that a theory. I think that is the exact sociological mechanism at play.
Wait, really?
Yeah, absolutely. An inside joke requires a hyper-specific shared context among a few people. An idiom is just an inside joke that has scaled up to an entire culture.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
It relies entirely on a shared understanding of the world rather than the literal definitions of the words being spoken.
But this brings up a massive cognitive hurdle, and I think it's why learners feel that terror we mentioned earlier. Because when you are learning a language, your brain is fundamentally relying on translation.
It's constantly swapping one word for another.
Yeah, you hear a sound, your brain fetches the translation from your native language, and you piece the sentence together like a puzzle. Idioms don't just complicate that process, they actively short-circuit it.
Oh, they blow the whole system up.
You translate the words perfectly, but the resulting sentence is a hallucination.
It's not just a short circuit, honestly. It's a cognitive betrayal.
A betrayal, that's a strong word.
But think about it. Your brain did exactly what it was trained to do. It followed all the rules of grammar and vocabulary perfectly, and yet the output makes zero sense.
It did the math right, but the answer is wrong.
Exactly. The brain is presented with a literal image, say, a piece of cake, but the context demands an abstract meaning. To process an idiom, your brain actually has to actively suppress that literal image it just generated and search for a secondary hidden meaning.
Wow. I want to dive deep into that friction between the literal image and the hidden meaning, because Amanaria's guide gives us a fantastic list of the classics to decode.
It's a really solid list.
And I don't want to just, list them off. I want us to look at the psychology of the imagery they use. Let's start with their first thematic category, which is effort and ease. The guide highlights piece of cake and hits
Well,
the books.
Two perfect examples of how we process abstract concepts.
Right. So Aman and Ria note that piece of cake represents something very easy, while hit the books means to start studying seriously. What completely fascinates me here isn't the definition. I mean, we all know what these mean.
Sure.
It's the universal human instinct to take an abstract, invisible concept, like mental effort, and force it into the physical, tangible world. You cannot touch the concept of easy. It has no weight, no texture,
It's completely invisible.
but you can absolutely touch, smell, and taste a slice of cake.
And look at the specific physical object we chose for that. We didn't choose a carrot or a bowl of oatmeal.
Right. Nobody says, oh, that test was a bowl of oatmeal.
Exactly. We chose cake. Eating a piece of cake is a universally understood human experience of low effort and incredibly high biological reward.
Oh, the sugar rush.
Yeah, it requires no physical exertion to consume, it's pleasant, and your brain is flooded with dopamine from the sugar. So, when we want to communicate to another human being that a task requires zero struggle and yields a positive result, we don't use clinical words.
We borrow the physical sensation of eating a dessert.
We map the abstract concept onto a bodily sensation.
That is embodied cognition at its finest. We literally feel the language. And you see the exact opposite happening with hit the books.
Oh, completely.
Because studying is an abstract mental state. It happens entirely and visibly inside your skull. But frustration, discipline, and intense effort, those are highly kinetic feelings.
I'd take that a step further, actually. Hitting isn't just kinetic, it's aggressive.
Yeah, it's violent.
Books are inanimate physical objects. When we say we are going to hit the books, we are creating a dynamic, almost violent visual image of attacking the study material.
Like going to war with a textbook.
It externalizes the internal struggle. It tells the listener, I am not just going to passively read this. I am going into combat with this information.
So we use physical objects to understand our own internal solitary effort. But what happens when we throw a second person into the mix?
That's where things get really messy.
Because studying is solitary, but human interaction introduces a whole new layer of chaos and anxiety. Which brings us to the second category in the source guide, social interaction.
This is my favorite category.
It's so relatable. Aman and Ria highlight break the ice, meaning to start a conversation to relieve tension, and our boardroom favorite, spill the beans, meaning to reveal a secret.
Social tension is one of the most uncomfortable, abstract experiences a human can have. We feel it physically in our bodies.
Yes, you walk into a room where you don't know anyone, and the silence literally feels heavy. It feels rigid.
And that rigidity is key to the metaphor. How do we describe a state of rigidity that prevents natural flow?
We use the physical environment?
We use ice. Imagine a frozen river. Water is supposed to flow, just like conversation is supposed to flow. But when the temperature drops, when the social anxiety rises, the river freezes solid.
Everything just stops.
You can't sail a boat down it. You are stuck. To restore the flow, you have to initiate a physical, forceful intervention. You have to break the ice.
So the conversation is the water, the participants are the boats, and the social awkwardness is the frozen surface blocking the harbor.
That's exactly it.
That is metaphorically brilliant. It perfectly captures why starting a conversation in a silent room feels like manual labor. You are breaking through a barrier. But okay, let's look at spill the beans.
Let's do it.
Why on earth does revealing a deeply hidden secret equate to dropping a bowl of legumes?
I actually want to challenge you to think about the physical reality of dropping a bowl of dried beans. What actually happens?
Well, it is absolute, unmitigated chaos. They bounce off the floor, they scatter in 100 different directions, they roll under the refrigerator, they go into the stove.
Exactly. It is a sudden, dramatic increase in entropy. And here's the crucial part. Once you spill a bowl of dried beans, you can never, ever get every single one of them back into the bowl perfectly.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Some are lost forever. The action is entirely irreversible.
That is profound.
A secret behaves exactly the same way. When a secret is kept, it is contained. It is controlled. But the moment it leaves your mouth, the information scatters.
It bounces from person to person.
You can't contain it anymore. The secret is out, rolling under the metaphorical refrigerator. Impossible to put back in the container.
That completely changes how I view that phrase.
Yeah.
If you literally say, I released the confidential information, it's factually accurate, but it feels so sterile.
Right. It doesn't convey the panic.
It doesn't capture the chaotic, irreversible panic of the information scattering out of your control. The beans bouncing on the floor is the only visual that truly does justice to the feeling of a leaked secret.
Which is exactly why idioms are so sticky. They survive for generations because the physical imagery perfectly mirrors the emotional reality.
Let's push this even further into the most complex category Aman and Ria present, which is states of being. These are phrases we use to describe our physical or emotional status, or the status of the world around us.
This is where the imagery gets really vivid.
The guide gives us 4 major ones. Under the weather for feeling sick, on cloud 9 for being extremely happy, once in a blue moon for rarity, and cost an arm and a leg for something very expensive.
Notice how we immediately retreat to the natural environment to explain our internal health with under the weather.
Yeah, why do we do that?
Because illness is an internal microscopic battle. You can't see a virus. But being caught in bad weather, a heavy, oppressive storm pressing down on you, is a physical sensation of vulnerability that every human on Earth understands.
Right, you are powerless against the weather. You can't fight a storm, you just have to wait it out.
It's just like you can't fight a cold, you just have to rest.
So under the weather borrows the crushing weight and helplessness of a storm to describe the heaviness of a sinus infection. It's brilliant.
And on cloud 9 utilizes the exact opposite physical physics.
Buoyancy. Because extreme happiness makes us feel light. We talk about having a spring in our step or feeling like a weight has been lifted. Joy is fundamentally anti-gravity.
We want to float away.
We elevate the imagery so much that we aren't even on the ground anymore. We are floating on clouds. Though I do have to ask, why cloud 9? Why not cloud 4 or cloud 20?
The historical origins are actually a bit disputed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some attribute it to the 1896 edition of the International Cloud Atlas, which supposedly classified the highest, fluffiest cumulonimbus clouds as type 9.
Okay, that makes sense.
Others trace it to Buddhism and the stages of enlightenment. But honestly, the exact historical origin matters much less than the cognitive resonance.
Right, it's about how it feels.
Exactly. The phrase survived because the human brain inherently associates maximum altitude with maximum euphoria.
It's the ultimate high. But let's shift from the atmosphere to outer space.
Hmm.
Rhea gives the example in the text. I eat fast food once in a blue moon, meaning very rarely. This is an astronomical metaphor,
It relies entirely on measurable natural scarcity. A blue moon refers to the rare occurrence of a second full moon within a single calendar month.
which doesn't happen often.
Not at all, because the lunar cycle is about 29.5 days. Getting two full moons in 1 month happens only once every 2 to 3 years. We borrow the scarcity of the cosmos to describe the infrequency of our own mundane actions.
But out of all the states of being in the guide, I want to spend some serious time on the last one. Cost an arm and a leg,
This is a wild one.
meaning very expensive. We're talking about inflation and commerce, and our brain's immediate instinct is to use bodily dismemberment as a unit of measurement.
It is pretty intense.
Why do we jump to such incredibly violent, hyperbolic imagery to describe buying a fancy car or a house?
I think it speaks to how abstract the concept of money actually is. Money is an artificial human invention. A dollar bill has no intrinsic physical value.
It's just paper.
Exactly. So when a price becomes so astronomically high that our abstract understanding of money begins to break down, we have to anchor the cost to the most universally valuable physical asset we possess,
Our own bodies.
our own limbs.
That is fascinating. The abstraction of the currency fails, so we revert to biology.
Exactly. How do you truly express to someone that a price feels outrageously painfully high? Saying the monetary value was substantial conveys no pain.
It's just boring math.
But claiming that the transaction literally requires you to chop off your own limbs. It's dramatic, it's hyperbolic, and it communicates the visceral agony of parting with your hard-earned wealth.
Wow.
Hyperbole acts as a psychological stress relief valve.
It's economic hyperbole. I love that. But this vivid, almost visceral imagery is exactly what leads us into the most perilous part of Aman and Ria's guide.
Right, things can go wrong very quickly.
Because if you take this vivid imagery literally, the results aren't just confusing, they can be disastrous. I want to move into what I'm calling the danger zone.
The danger zone is a very real, very hostile environment for language learners.
Aman and Ria paint a perfectly absurd scenario in the guide to illustrate this. Imagine someone hearing the phrase break the ice for the very first time. They aren't in on the inside joke. They don't share the cultural context.
So what do?
The guide suggests they might literally start looking around the room for actual frozen water to smash.
It's a funny mental image, a guy at a cocktail party looking for an ice pick, but it highlights a profound cognitive trap.
How so?
Well, we mentioned earlier that the brain has to suppress the literal image, but let's look at the sheer cognitive load that requires. The human brain is incredibly fast, but its default setting, its path of least resistance, is literal acoustic processing.
Okay, break that down for me.
You hear the sound for ice, your auditory cortex processes it, your memory fetches the image of a frozen cube, and you project that image in your mind's eye.
So the literal picture is already painted before you even realize the context is wrong.
Precisely. To process the idiom, your brain has to experience a moment of intense cognitive dissonance. It looks at the mental picture of the ice cube, looks at the social setting of the party, realizes they don't match, throws out the ice cube, searches its database for abstract secondary meanings, finds social tension, and then replaces the mental image.
That is a lot of mental gymnastics.
And all of this has to happen in milliseconds while the other person is still talking and delivering the next sentence.
No wonder non-native speakers feel physically exhausted after a conversation. You are essentially running two overlapping software programs at the same time. You have the literal translation rendering in the foreground, and you are desperately trying to force the abstract cultural meaning to load in the background.
It's exhausting.
But the source material brings up a second peril in the danger zone that I think is even more insidious. Aman asks Ria point blank, should learners use idioms all the time?
And her answer is very important.
She is absolutely clear. She says, not really. Use idioms naturally, not excessively. The guide warns that a few well-placed idioms sound much better than forcing too many into a conversation.
This is where we shift from the cognitive challenge of understanding idioms to the performative challenge of using them.
The actual execution.
Right. Once a learner cracks the code, there is a massive temptation to use idioms constantly. You finally understand the inside joke, and you want to prove to the native speakers that you belong in the club. You want to flash your cultural credentials.
It's an overcompensation. And I think the best analogy for this comes straight from the culinary world.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
Using idioms is exactly like using hot sauce, or a very pungent, heavy spice like saffron or cumin, when you're cooking a complex meal.
Okay, walk me through the flavor profile here.
Think about the mechanics of cooking. A few drops of hot sauce, a single pinch of a strong spice. It elevates the entire dish. It brings out the hidden flavors, it adds warmth, and it makes the meal taste authentic and vibrant.
It enhances everything.
It shows that the chef understands nuance.
Mm.
But what happens if you discover you like hot sauce? So you take the cap off and dump the entire bottle into a single bowl of soup.
You destroy the dish.
Completely. You can't taste the chicken, you can't taste the vegetables. It's just overwhelming, painful heat. Your palate is ruined.
That is an incredibly apt comparison.
Right.
If we map that onto language, consider what a sentence sounds like when it is overspiced with idioms. If I say to you, once in a blue moon, I hit the books because it's a piece of cake, but today I'm under the weather, so it costs an arm and a leg to break the ice.
I don't even know what you just said. It's just a wall of noise.
Exactly. I don't sound like a native speaker. I sound like an artificial intelligence that just gained access to a phrase book and is trying to optimize for maximum cultural output.
It's so jarring.
It sounds incredibly artificial. The color and personality that Aman and Ria championed earlier gets completely washed out by the sheer volume of metaphors. Instead of sounding fluent, you sound cliché.
It's spice overload. You are burning the listener's metaphorical ears, which leads to a deep psychological paralysis for the advanced learner.
Because they're scared of messing up the recipe?
Exactly. Because once you realize that overusing idioms makes you sound ridiculous, you become terrified of using them at all. You have a bottle of hot sauce in your hand, but you are paralyzed by the fear that one wrong drop will ruin your social credibility.
That is the ultimate linguistic imposter syndrome.
Totally.
You know the words, you know the meaning, but you don't trust your own execution. You are afraid that your timing will be off or your intonation will be wrong, and instead of sounding like you're in on the joke, you'll just sound weird.
Okay, so this brings us to the massive practical dilemma of this entire deep dive. If we shouldn't memorize a giant list of idioms, because then we'll be tempted to spam them like a robot dumping hot sauce everywhere, and if we are paralyzed by the fear of using them incorrectly.
What's the solution?
Exactly. How are we actually supposed to master them? How do we acquire that natural intuition? This leads us straight into section 4 of the guide, which I think holds the key to the entire puzzle. Context is king.
This is where Aman and Ria pivot from theory to deeply practical, actionable advice.
Right.
Ria asks, how can people learn idioms? And Aman's response is the antidote to the danger zone. He says through podcasts, movies, books, and conversations.
Real life stuff.
Exactly. And the text emphasizes this deeply. Learn idioms in context.
Learn in context is one of those pieces of advice that teachers give all the time, but I don't think people truly understand why it works on a neurological level.
They just think it means watch Netflix.
Right. Why is learning from a movie so vastly superior to sitting in a quiet room with a stack of vocabulary flashcards?
To understand that, we have to contrast how the brain stores different types of memories. When you use a flashcard, you are creating a two-dimensional flat memory.
It's just data.
You are linking text to text, you see the text spill the beans, and you force your brain to link it to the text, reveal a secret. There is no environment, no emotion, no life attached to it. It's sterile data storage.
It's like trying to learn how to swim by reading a physics textbook about buoyancy. You understand the math, but you have no idea what the water feels like.
That's a great way to put it. But when you encounter an idiom in its natural habitat, say, in a tense scene in a movie or a hilarious moment on a podcast, you aren't just learning the words. Your brain is sponging up an enormous amount of surrounding metadata.
Metadata. I love that term.
Yeah.
Break down the linguistic metadata of an idiom. What else are we absorbing besides the words?
You are absorbing the speaker's tone of voice. Are they whispering the idiom? Are they screaming it in anger?
Are they laughing?
Right. You are observing their microexpressions. Does their face look guilty when they spill the beans? Are their eyes wide and bright when they're on cloud 9?
Oh, the visual cues.
You are mapping the physical environment. Who are they talking to? Is it a formal meeting with a boss or a hushed conversation with a best friend in a coffee shop?
You're just building a whole scene.
All of this sensory input, visual, auditory, emotional, binds together to create a multisensory, three-dimensional memory in your hippocampus.
Oh, that makes total sense. You aren't memorizing the phrase. You are memorizing the entire ecosystem in which the phrase naturally survives.
Precisely. And because that memory is rich with contextual metadata, retrieval becomes automatic.
It just pops into your head.
Right. When you find yourself in a real-world situation that shares similar metadata, say, you are feeling guilty and talking to a friend in a coffee shop, the environment itself acts as a trigger. Your brain naturally surfaces spill the beans because the context demands it, rather than you having to consciously pause, open your mental filing cabinet, and search for the right flashcard.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for the listener.
Go for it.
Because it is very easy for the two of us to sit here in a comfortable studio drinking our coffee and theoretically declare, just learn in context. Watch a movie.
Sure, it sounds simple.
But let's go back to that psychological paralysis we talked about. When you are out there in the real world, in the middle of a fast-paced, unpredictable conversation with a native speaker, your heart is beating fast. You don't want to look stupid.
The stakes feel incredibly high.
Isn't it incredibly stressful trying to perfectly recall if the phrase is spill the beans or drop the beans or throw the beans? The pressure to execute perfectly in real time is immense.
That is a deeply valid anxiety, the fear of getting the inside joke wrong and alienating yourself from the group. But this is exactly why Amin and Ria end their guide the way they do.
With a little grace.
Their final message isn't about achieving linguistic perfection. It is a deeply comforting philosophy of communication.
Yes, I have their exact quote right here, and I think it's the most important sentence in the source text. Aman says, "You don't need perfect English." And Ria finishes the thought, "Just consistency."
That is the ultimate golden rule that frees you from the danger zone. Perfection is an illusion, and the pursuit of it will paralyze you.
It'll just can't be silent.
Perfect recall of every idiom isn't the goal. The goal of language is consistent human connection. Love to run a thought experiment on your drop the beans example.
Okay.
If you are in a conversation and you boldly try to use an idiom, but you accidentally say, "Oh no, I accidentally dropped the beans," what actually happens in reality?
Well, the native speaker might look confused for a half second, but then their brain autocorrects it. They realize you meant spill the beans. They probably chuckle, maybe they warmly correct you, and the conversation continues. The sky doesn't fall.
Exactly. The connection is still made. In fact, I would argue that making a slight mistake with an idiom often endears you to the native speaker.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it shows that you are trying to engage with their culture, their inside jokes, even if you don't have it perfectly dialed in yet. That vulnerability can actually be a phenomenal icebreaker in itself. It relieves the tension of trying to be perfect.
So the message from Aman and Ria is essentially, forgive yourself. Leaning into consistency, consistently exposing yourself to the rich metadata of podcasts and movies, consistently taking the risk to use a little bit of hot sauce in your conversations, and consistently forgiving yourself when you mess up the recipe. That is the only true path to fluency.
It shifts the entire paradigm of language learning from passing a sterile mathematical test to joining a messy human conversation.
So what does this all mean for us today? Let's take a step back and look at the massive journey we've just taken through Aman and Ria's conversational guide.
It's been a deep exploration of how our minds work.
We started by dismantling the idea that language is a clean, binary formula. We explored how idioms act as the vivid, non-literal inside jokes of human culture, the vital tools we use to add color and emotional resonance to our speech.
And we looked at the science of it, too.
We dissected the anatomy of these phrases, realizing that they are essentially mechanisms of embodied cognition. They take invisible, abstract struggles like mental effort, social anxiety, and deep secrets, and force them into highly physical, tangible imagery. We map our lives onto eating cake, breaking ice, dropping beans, and floating on clouds.
We also didn't shy away from the peril, though. We explored the very real danger zone of idioms.
The literal ice pick.
The intense cognitive friction required to suppress literal translation, and the absolute culinary disaster of overusing them and ruining the natural flavor profile of a conversation.
The hot sauce effect. And finally, we grounded all of this psychological theory in the practical, actionable advice from our guides. Ditch the two-dimensional flashcards, immerse yourself in the three-dimensional metadata of movies and podcasts. And above all, remember that consistent, imperfect, vulnerable communication will always be vastly superior to silent, fearful perfectionism.
It is an incredibly liberating framework for anyone trying to master not just English, but the art of connecting with people.
So, to you, the listener, we have a challenge for you today. As you go about your day, keep your ears wide open. Whether you are listening to another podcast on your commute, watching a movie tonight, or just chatting with a coworker, I challenge you to spot just one idiom in the wild. Listen for that specific moment when the literal words being spoken make absolutely zero logical sense, but the emotional feeling they convey is crystal clear.
Pay attention to the metadata. Notice the speaker's tone of voice. Look at their body language. Watch the beans spill in real time and observe how the people around them react.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to ponder on your own. We've talked extensively today about how idioms are created to anchor abstract concepts to our shared physical and natural environment. We borrow imagery from the weather, the moon, ice, and farm produce because those are the physical realities our ancestors dealt with.
Right, our historical context.
But the world is changing at an unprecedented speed. Our environment is fundamentally shifting. So ask yourself, what kind of brand new idioms are being unconsciously created right now in our modern, hyperdigital, screen-obsessed age? When our daily struggles are no longer about physical weather or harvesting beans, but about algorithms, bandwidth, and virtual reality, what weird, non-literal phrases are we inventing today that future generations of language learners are going to have to painfully decode?
That is a deeply fascinating sociological question, the inside jokes of tomorrow.
Think about it the next time you find yourself navigating the muddy, colorful waters of human language. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.